Tempesta.
Welcome back to another season of episode of Sports Scene, episode 2 of this wonderful season. I'm joined today by Will Camardella, Trace Tempesta. Gentlemen, Trace, welcome to the show for the first time, by the way, man. We're going to see what you got very quickly, but let's go ahead and jump into what's going to be an exciting show, starting with USC women's basketball, y'all. They've been on a tear lately, winning 4 of their past 5, led by a scoring tear by India Rogers. She's been averaging 17 a game over that span. Y'all, this is a team that's on the tournament bubble right now. Is this a tournament team? I'm going to flip that to you first, Will.
Well, that's exactly right. They're on the bubble right now. They're 8-7 in conference play, 10-8 overall in the season, but they have won 4 of their last 5. However, when you take a look, are they a tournament team? I'm going to say when all things are said and done, they fall slightly out of the tournament. I say they're one of the last teams to miss. That's all about scheduling. There are 4 teams in the Pac-12 right now ranked in the top 25 in the nation. That's Oregon, that's Stanford, that's UCLA, that's Arizona. USC has at least 2 games left with those top 25 teams left in the regular season, and I believe that they will falter in both those games and falter by a pretty significant margin. And I think the fact that they cannot pull out either one of those games or at least compete in those games means that they will not have the resume to get in.
So, Will, you see these Pac-12 teams as challenges. I see them as opportunities. So they're 5th in the Pac-12 right now. USC has to play Stanford, Oregon, UCLA, and Arizona. They're all ranked. Now, here's the thing. We played Arizona earlier. We lost to them by 1. UCLA, that's a rival. Oregon, that game is at home. So basically, every challenge in front of them, I think, is another opportunity to present themselves as a Pac-12 national tournament worthy team. So my answer is yes. I think they're going to overcome their bubble status, and I think they're going to make the national tournament.
Well, there's no question you have opportunities here, but opportunities are like draft picks in a professional sports league. They're absolutely nothing until you take advantage of them and do the right things there. Yes, they only lost by 1 to Arizona, but if you look back against every other top 25 team they played this year, they have not been able to come within single digits of winning that game. Every single loss has come by more than 10. So on your schedule, you have UCLA and you have Oregon. Both of their early season matches were absolute blowouts, and you may see Oregon again in a potential 4 versus 5 tournament game. And I just haven't seen that this team can compete with the top teams in the conference. Yes, they only lost by 1 to Arizona, but that game was all the way back in December. More recent evidence says that they can't hang on there.
Yeah, I get that it's an uphill battle. And I understand what you're saying about how some of these games weren't really competitive at the beginning. But it's not like they don't have to win them all. It's really just about winning 1 or 2. I said, UCLA rivalry, that's huge. Anything can happen there. Oregon's at home. We played Arizona tight. So I think as long as 1 or 2 of these opportunities land, that's going to be enough to establish themselves. Because when you're on the verge of the bubble there, it's really just about giving me something that's going to push you over the ledge. And I think 1, 2 of these games is really all that's going to be necessary to make the bubble.
USC gets off to very, very, very slow starts. If you take a look at the Oregon game earlier this year, they gave up 92 points in total in the game. If you look at the UCLA game, they gave up 29 points in the first quarter. That is suicide against a top 25 team. Yes, you can have a tough start against a team like Washington State as they did, and you can come back and win because the team isn't as talented. But when you're talking about a team that has as much firepower as an Oregon or a UCLA, I mean, I haven't seen that they can hang with those teams to start a game. And when you find yourself playing catch up, that's going to be really difficult to come back from. And that's why I don't think they can even be that competitive.
I understand what you're saying, but let me tell you about this. So this team has a philosophy that works for them. When certain things land their ways, they are successful. The team is 8-3 when they hold their opponents under 70 points. That'll be a challenge against opposing teams, but if they can do it, that's a recipe for success. They also have the second highest 3-point percentage in the Pac-12. That means of the 4 teams that we listed are the biggest opponents, they're better than half of them at 3-point shooting. And that's a lethal skill, especially when you have players like Shalexis Aaron, who scored 10 points in 83 seconds in her last game. That's lethal. That is a microwave who can get you buckets when you need them. And those type of plays, that type of volatility at the end of the game, that's the difference between winning and losing games. So for a March Madness tournament or the Pac-12 tournament play style, where it's really just about do a couple things go your way and do we only need a couple wins to happen, I'm going to say this team can do it.
Yes, they have enough firepower to compete at the end of the game, but again, they have to be in the game at the end to even put themselves in that position. The defense is very spread out. They get off the slow starts, as I talked about, and while yes, they have a high ranking with regards to 3-point shooting, they're only 6th in the league in scoring. So it hasn't translated to an absolute onslaught of total points, which is, again, what matters. Yes, they have a good record when they hold their opponents to under 70 points, but how many times this year have they done that against a top 25 opponent? The answer is 0. So I definitely – they have some skills, and they've pulled off a couple nice wins this year against lower-level opponents. But, again, since December 10th, they really have not been able to do it against the top-level teams, which they need to.
I'm hearing a lot of really good points here on both sides, and honestly, I'm a little bit torn myself. But I do know a lot of what this boils down to is a lot of perceptions and narrative, right? How teams perceive the talent on or the people who are ultimately making the decision whether or not you're going to make the tournament, how they perceive the talent on your team, right? I do think that people look at India Rogers. I do think that people look at Elisa Peely and they see 2 of the best players in the country. Those 2 alone, by my estimation, could be enough to propel them to at least being in the surf or that fringe level of the NCAA tournament. But I do want to flip this question to you, Trace. What do you think is the key? Will brings up a lot of strong points about slow starts and not being in the game at the end of games. What do you think is the key for them to combat that sort of problem that they've been having time and again throughout the season?
I think the key is going to be offensive alignment and letting the stars take over. India Rogers is such a fascinating game manager. I mean, I think last game her stat sheet was 17, 7, and 7. So she can fill the box score. She has a high IQ in terms of knowing when to run out the clock and how to get her offensive going in crunch time situations. Alyssa Peely was having such a great game. She has a high motor, offensive rebounds. She was sacrificing her body to make plays and saves. So I think when this team's firing offensively, there's no stopping them.
Unfortunately, they just don't have the most firepower in the Pac-12. Oregon has more. UCLA has more. That's just a fact. I mean, their offensive production has been excellent this year as a team. And I don't know. I just don't believe that the USC defense is going to be able to keep up. If you're getting into a shootout with any of those teams, even if they're close, I don't think India Rogers, although I like her, is enough to get them over the top.
I've seen it before. It happened with Utah. They're a less quality opponent, but here's the thing. They're 4 of 5 in their last games. So we know the momentum's on their side, and really all it's going to take is just a couple of these fringe games. It was a 1-point loss to Arizona. If that switches in a bigger stage, that's all it's going to take to push us over the edge.
Well, time can only tell. We'll see what they're able to do against these last 3 matchups, Oregon State, Oregon, and UCLA. Speaking of USC-UCLA matchups, the men's volleyball team opened their season with a bang this past weekend, right? Defeating number 6 UCLA in their opening matchup, something that I'm pretty sure nobody saw coming, right? What is your perception of this team now? Obviously, they were unranked going in, but now, the question might stand, is this a potential national title contender? I'll flip that to you, Trace.
There are some pros on this team, and Will, I know you're going to mention them, and I'm sure you'll be right about a couple things, but my problem is I just don't think they have enough to be on that national contention level. They weren't ranked to enter. They've played one game so far, and they're still not ranked. We got an honorable mention. They do top 15. They were ranked like right around 18th so far. But I just don't think there's enough on this team to say they're a national contender.
I don't know. The production was relatively evenly distributed. 7 USC players had multiple kills throughout the game. 2 of them had double digits. Billy Fauntleroy had 18. Brandon Browning had 16. I really, really, really like what this team showed against UCLA the other night. And yes, they'll get 2 more opportunities. They play 2 more times, Thursday and Saturday. And if you can pull off even one of those wins, absolutely, you're a title contender. UCLA is number 6 in the entire country. And for USC to pull out that victory, that's got to open some eyes, as it should.
UCLA was 6, and let's talk about their schedule ahead. They have to play UCLA twice. They're the 7th seed right now because we beat them. Okay, that's tough. Pepperdine twice. They're 6th in the nation. That's tough. We have to play BYU 3 times, and they're ranked number 1 in the nation. Grand Canyon 3 times, ranked 10. Do you see where I'm going with this? The point being is the schedule is an uphill battle. There's really no off games. Concordia University might be our easiest opponent, and they're in the same bubble as us. It's like if we're ranked 18th, I think they're ranked 17th. They're so close, and I just think the schedule is going to be too tough to say that we're going to win these games consistently.
And hats off to Jeff Nygaard, the coach, right, for saying, you know what, we're going to go play the best of the best, and we're going to see how we match up. This is an experienced roster. They have, I want to say, 14 of their players returning from last season with experience under their belt. So hats off to the coach for having confidence in them, and lo and behold, the confidence was not misplaced. They came out and showed what they had. Will, I'm going to flip it to you, man. These last 2 games, you mentioned them against UCLA. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I mean, you brought up toughness. USC has a very tough schedule against a lot of tough opponents. Well, in game 1, I think USC demonstrated they're a tough team. Set 1, they won in overtime. Set 2, they won in overtime. In set 3, they lost 25-19, and everyone in that building thought, okay, now UCLA is catching up. Now they're the team. They're turning into the team we all expected them to be. And USC still pulled off set 4. They've shown resiliency. They've shown toughness. They've shown they're a fundamentally sound volleyball team. So yes, they have a tough schedule, but I think they've proven they can handle it, and I think that will be demonstrated in their next 2 games against UCLA. I think they pull off at least one.
I just question what you've seen from enough to say that they've proven something. Yes, the UCLA game was good, but it was one game. And I think during this COVID season, there's going to be a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty where a team can look good on one day and look bad the next day. So it's been one game. We're still not ranked. UCLA still ranked 7th. We beat them. They fell down 1 spot. So I just don't think there's enough here to say that they're on a national level where they're going to be consistently ranked above teams like BYU, Hawaii, UCLA, or Stanford, and other tough teams that we have to play.
Well, Trace, I can only use the information we have right now, and the information is that USC is 1-0, beating the number 6 team at the time in the country. Their resiliency has been so good so far that I don't think you can doubt them. And also another thing to keep in mind with regards to this game, UCLA has a lot more skill on the volleyball court. They had more blocks. They had more aces, for example. USC was a better coach team. They were a better fundamentally sound team. They played together. They exposed the weaknesses in the UCLA defense. They had a much higher shooting percentage, 24.6%, than their opponents did. Maybe they don't have as much talent as some of these top teams, but I think they have the coaching, and I think they work together very well as a team.
I also saw some flaws from the stat sheet, though. Like our setter, Chris Hall, for example, he had a great game, but he was the only one who could record assists. I think the next guy probably had 2 assists total, while he had roughly 49. So I think we can be one-dimensional at times from what I've seen, and I just don't think that's going to be enough when we have to consistently beat these good teams. Because let me remind you, it's not the situation with women's basketball where just a couple good wins are going to get us in. We're talking about national contenders. So that means they're going to have to beat these BYUs, Pepperdines, Stanfords regularly. And I just don't think we have the roster for that.
You bring up an interesting point in terms of the burden being a lot on a few people's shoulders to perform, right? Your boy Cole Paxson, right? He had a lot. What was it? I have the stat here. 12 digs, right? They have certain players that they know are going to be stars, and they have certain players that they know, aren't quite there yet. Will, are you concerned at all with putting so much of a burden on a few players on that team, or is that something that you think the guys that they have in house can handle?
Well, if you're talking about contending in the national mix, yeah, you're going to need some guys to carry the load. But I think it's a team that really knows its role very well. Everyone on the team. You talked about only a couple guys had a lot of assists, but a lot of people were getting in on the stat sheet with regards to kills, with regards to a high shooting percentage. I saw a lot of guys blocking shots. I think it's a team that meshes very well together, even if some guys carry the load on certain nights. I mean, you're going to need that to be a contender sometimes.
I understand what you're saying, that some people have to carry, but I just want to keep in mind here, we've only seen one game. So there's a lot that we could like from the first one. If you want to look at it just from a glance, right? We beat the 6th-ranked team, a rival, UCLA, on their court. But it's one game. So the fact that we're still not ranked after it, I think is indicative of the flaws that we're going to have down the road.
What is it that you saw that gives you pause in terms of things that you don't see playing out the same way that they did on that particular night or day that they played?
I think we had a lot of forced errors. I saw our serving errors were far more than UCLA's, and you talked about discipline from a coaching perspective, but those forced errors, those type of things just can't be explained, and the best teams will punish you for things like that. We were able to clutch out these overtime victories in set 1 and set 2, and even our 4th set was an overtime victory, but that doesn't mean we should rely on it. An overtime victory like that just means that a couple things went our way, and we can't bank on those things to go USC's way every single time. I think there's a lot to question there.
Well, let's talk about errors. The two teams finished with the exact same number of errors, 28 apiece. USC won the error battle in sets 1, 2, and 4. They only lost in set 3. Yes, set 3, they made a lot of mistakes. I get it. But let's also keep in mind, this is a very strange season with regards to COVID. USC's first 3 matches were already postponed. UCLA should have, in theory, dominated the error battle because they had played 3 games going in, right?
Look, that's a fair point, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that there were 28 errors. Even if you talk about UCLA had 28 errors and they played before, well, that's okay. They're still the 7th seed. They still have expectations to be better. We're the 17th seed, and that's speculation because it's top 15, and we didn't make the cut. So I don't think there's enough to say that we're going to win this next game, we're going to sweep these next few games, and then even if we do that, we end up 9th. Okay, so we're talking national contention, right? Are we going to get to top 5? Does that mean we're going to have to sweep BYU or something like that? I think the road is just a ridiculously uphill battle for this USC team.
It's a tough road, and so far they've been climbing it masterfully. That's all I have to say about that.
It's one game. Let's keep that in moderation.
I'll ask you this, Trace. If they say 4 days from now we're looking back and this is a USC team that beat UCLA 3 straight times, does that change your mind at all?
You know, first let me say this. That would be really tough to do. This is a rivalry game. Like, they're already mad that we beat them once as the ranked team on their court. So I think this first one was a tough one for them to swallow. So if we beat this 2 and 3 times, I would consider changing my mind. I'm not ready to go there yet because, first of all, I don't think that situation is very likely. But if it happens, I need to see the fashion in which it happens, because if it's dominant, I'm willing to consider it. If it's not, I don't think I'll change my mind.
I don't know how you can say they can't beat UCLA. They just did. They shot significantly better. They outworked them at many points. They were really dominant at different points, especially at the start of set 1, for example. They for a team that played only 1 game compared to a team that's ranked 6th and played only 3, USC looked a lot more well prepared throughout that game. And why can't that carry over when they're playing 2 more straight?
3 overtime wins as your 3-set victories is not dominant. That's just a couple things landing your way. So I think the argument that UCLA wasn't prepared is actually a great reason why they're going to bounce back, is because if they weren't prepared at first, now they have a game behind them to learn off of. So it's a series of 3. The first one doesn't go their way, and I think it's a pretty safe bet that either 2 or 3 will go their way.
All right, real quick before we move on to Will's hot take, I want to ask, when it's all said and done, where do we see the story playing out for both of these teams? Is USC a top 10 team in the nation? Is UCLA, do they climb back their way into the top 5? Where do we see these teams landing when the season's over?
I think the schedule's a little bit too tough to see them running the table, but I think they get enough impressive wins down the stretch where we're talking about them at the end of the year as a top 10 team.
I think if it's top 10, it's probably 10. The tough schedule. I don't think they're on the national contention level. I would say 10 to 15, the lower half of the rankings is where I'd place them. It'll be a good season. It just won't be a national championship season.
Fair enough. All right. Well, the floor is yours, my guy. You have a hot take for us relating to the NFL and this whole Deshaun situation. I don't want to give too much away because it's your take, so I'll give you the floor, man.
There has been so much speculation this year. Where is Deshaun Watson landing? The answer is nowhere. He will be a Houston Texan at the start of the 2021 NFL regular season. Nick Caserio is their new GM. He's coming from New England. He is not used to players walking into his office and demanding to be traded places, especially when they're the absolute best players on their roster. I think he's going to stand firm. I think he'll stand through a holdout. I think he'll stand through comments on Twitter, and he will make sure that either Deshaun Watson is the starting quarterback at the start of 2021, or he is not playing anywhere at all.
I think it's a little past time to say that this relationship can be revived. I understand there's a new general manager, but Deshaun Watson wasn't even respected enough from ownership to have this new general manager conversation be involved with him. So I don't think there's enough there to say this relationship can be revived. It might go down to this holdout situation. So if you're going to say that he's on the roster for a holdout, sure, what good is that? But if you're an owner and if you're a new general manager, you have an asset that's so valuable that if he's not producing for you, you need to flip it for something and you need to give him picks. So I don't think Deshaun Watson's going to be on this roster for the next couple months.
Let me be clear. I'm not here to defend Cal McNair. Cal McNair performed borderline franchise malpractice by telling his quarterback he got to pick the GM and then not even interviewing the candidate he preferred.
Disrespectful.
It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. I agree. However, at the end of the day, Deshaun Watson may be the decision of what they do with Deshaun Watson may be the most important decision that the Texans franchise ever makes, and they cannot take it lightly just because of a trade request. The reality is, if Houston says we're not trading you, Deshaun Watson's going to have a decision to make come training camp. He can either come in or play, or he can give up a year of his career and a year of a very, very high salary. We're talking about a $39 million average annual value over the next decade. Just to make a point. I mean, we'll see if he wants to do it, and credit to him for sticking up to his morals if he does. But I believe he's going to play.
Wait, Will, why do you believe the Houston Texans have the power in this case? Deshaun Watson's the star. He's been pretty vocal about what he wants, and he knows that, let's see, there's 32 teams in the league. Okay, 29 of them want him. I don't understand how you think the Texans organization has the power when Deshaun Watson's been so clear in what he wants, and he's been so clear that the Texans can't provide that.
They say 4 words: we're not trading you. And then they put the pressure on him. If he knows he's not getting traded, he can either not show up or play. Those are the only 2 options he has.
If he's not going to play, why would the Texans keep him?
To call his bluff? I mean, the reality is, if Nick Caserio trades Deshaun Watson, he has now laid out the framework for his organization that any star player, regardless of position, if they want out, will get out. That is a very, very bad precedent to set if you're interested in winning.
Precedent to set. Look, they've already thrown that out of the possibilities. The DeAndre Hopkins trade sucked. J.J. Watt, the hometown hero, like one of the best guys in the league, a great player on and off the court field, and they cut him? They just let him go because they couldn't trade him and they sure couldn't keep him. So I don't think there's anything redeemable about this organization. From a new GM, from a new owner, there's nothing they can do. And here's the thing, too, is you talked about a precedent already established for the organization. Well, the Matthew Stafford trade directly relates to this because Matthew Stafford is worse than Jared Goff, and the Lions got 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick for him. So we can see that if the Texans trade him, they're going to get something valuable out of it. So if you're an owner and your choices are, my guy's going to sit out, or I could get at least 2 first-round picks for him, why would you not do that, especially when you're a new GM and you need to establish a better trend for the organization?
There is no such thing in the NFL as a more valuable asset than a quarterback with the skill of Deshaun Watson.
Agreed.
Absolutely nothing. If you look at it from another team's perspective, look at it from the Jets' perspective. If I was the Jets, I would send all 4 of my first-round picks over the next 2 years to get Deshaun Watson.
Me too.
How much teams are willing to give up without blinking for Watson tell you about how valuable he is and how much effort the Texans really should be putting in keeping him here?
I don't think keeping is possible because it's about Deshaun Watson. Look, player empowerment is taking over the NBA. It's going to start merging into the NFL. If these guys aren't happy, if these guys are literally not going to play, then why would the general manager keep him? He's new. He needs to revive the culture. So get some first-round picks, go into rebuild mode, because Deshaun Watson, look, you and I can agree on this. Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback. He's ridiculously valuable. And when you trade him, the pull you get in return is going to be worth it. So how about you do that, give him what he wants, and then get what you want, which is a fresh start? Because can we agree that an era has ended in Houston? J.J. Watt's gone. DeAndre Hopkins is gone. They won last year. Can we agree that they need to start on something new?
They need to start on a new general manager. They need to start on a new head coach. They absolutely should not start on a new quarterback. They're not getting a better one than Deshaun Watson. I don't care how many picks you get. I don't care if you get number 1 pick. Even if you get the number 1 pick, you are praying Trevor Lawrence is going to even come close to what Deshaun Watson has already demonstrated himself to be.
Let me put it this way, man. I don't mean to interrupt you, Trace, but
go for it.
There's a time, where let's put it in relationship terms, right? You might have a dime piece, as Amine would put it, right? You might have a Caroline on your hands. But if you fumble that bag, there's no reconciliation there. There's no way to go unfumble the bag that's already been fumbled. Let's think about what Deshaun Watson has been through with the Houston Texans. Let's think about the fact that this is a franchise that kept Bill O'Brien at the helm, not just as a head coach, but also as a general manager for far longer than he ever deserved to be in that position. This is a team where he's seen DeAndre Hopkins get traded, a guy like Tyrann Mathieu in-house and leave, a guy like Jadeveon Clowney in-house and leave, a guy like J.J. Watt in-house and leave. They don't care about, if they gave a crap about what Deshaun Watson's future was, all of this wouldn't be happening. That relationship is irreparable. I didn't even mention the fact that you had this owner, right? Talk about inmates running the prison, and now guess who's running the team? The dude's son. I didn't even mention the fact what you brought up earlier. He had a literal consulting firm, right? They hired a consulting firm to go look, okay, who are the best candidates for our general manager position? The consulting firm comes back with 2 minority candidates. Perfect. That's exactly what Deshaun Watson wants, right? They come back with the dude from NFL Network, Louis Riddick, and they come back with somebody whose name I'm forgetting, but it was from the Pittsburgh Steelers, another minority candidate. And what does Kyle McNair do? Nick Caserio. We all know who runs the show down there in New England. Nick Caserio didn't have a hand in what that was. That's Bill Belichick. That's what happens down there. Our producer, Aiden, knows that. He's a Patriots fan. So when you ask me, why would Deshaun Watson care to stay in Houston, that relationship's irreparable. There's nothing that you can do at this point forward. If you keep him like you're suggesting, Will, you're holding the dude hostage, and no quarterback that's being held hostage is going to be the top 5 quarterback that you want him to be. Even if you force him to be there, he's not going to give you 110. He's not going to give you 110. What you're going to have is another, and it's funny because this is also Houston, you're going to have another James Harden situation. It's going to play out the exact same way.
Well, Deshaun Watson's going to have a decision to make. Does he want to sacrifice an entire year of his career, if that's the pressure Caserio wants to put on him, in order to get what he wants in terms of a trade? And you know what? Maybe he will. Maybe that's the exact decision he makes. But again, he's scheduled to make a lot of money next year. And when you hold out, it generally doesn't work well for you when we're talking about regular season games. I know it's a different position, but look at a guy like Le'Veon Bell. I mean, he sat out for the Steelers for more money, and he got sent to the football Sahara with Adam Gase and has not been the same running back since. I think that's I don't think that's such a no-brainer for Deshaun Watson in that situation. And I think that it would be the right decision for the Texans to make, to put that kind of pressure on him, as opposed to just towing to his demands right now. Again, you're talking about a top 3 quarterback in the league.
Well, here's what I think. I think there's a lose-lose option here, and there's a win-win option. If Deshaun Watson stays on the team and he holds out, that's a lose-lose. How does the organization win by that? They have a disgruntled star who's not playing for them. How does Deshaun Watson win by that? He doesn't get his money, and he's not happy. That's a lose-lose. A win-win situation is you trade him to whoever can offer you the best package. One, Deshaun Watson gets out of there. That's all he wants. He's made that so incredibly clear, as if the roster moves weren't enough. Now it's a personal thing about not being involved with the general manager. The relationship's beyond repair. He needs out. That's a win for him. A win for the organization. You're a new general manager. You need to establish something new. So this is your opportunity. Go get 4 first-round picks for him and start fresh. It's a tough situation, but it's an opportunity to still have a win in this situation. So it really boils down to that. Do you want a lose-lose or do you want a win-win situation? I think that's what we're dealing with here.
I've talked about draft picks earlier. Again, it's nothing until you use them, and there's no such thing as a win for the Texans when they're putting themselves in complete quarterback hell.
Oh, there's no win. You already lost. I think that's where the disconnect is. The Houston Texans have already lost. It was almost like when you think about a guy like Jamal Adams and how good he is. There's no way to trade some of these assets around the NFL and get what you deserve. When you trade a guy like Deshaun Watson, you already lost by trading him. But like you said, that's the situation of Nick Caserio. That's the situation that you stepped into, and to try to fit a square peg in a round hole, it's not going to happen. He doesn't want to be there. He might pull up. Hell, he might play some games. But if his heart's not in it, you're not going to get the quarterback that you're paying for. That's point blank period. All right, but I think that'll do it for this week's episode of Sports Scene Spirited Debate. Trace, hell of a job this week, man. That was pretty good for your first time. Will, as always, great job. Had a lot of fun, guys. Always go check out the social media, interact with us, engage with us. We love doing that with y'all at ANN Media Sports. That's at ANN Media Sports on both Instagram and Twitter. Check out all of our cool content. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.